Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight. And thank you for joining us on a public holiday if you are there. Freedom Day, very important day in our history. Tonight, we have a really special guest, Andre Alexander. Hi, Andre. Do you want to maybe just greet the viewers?
Yes, no problem. Hi, Jonathan. Thank you for inviting me to the program. Good evening, viewers, and thank you again for joining us this evening. I trust that we'd have a great conversation this evening. So enjoy the time with us. Yeah. God bless you guys.
Brilliant. Thank you, guys. Remember, Footy Express, please like and subscribe. I'm not very good at marketing the show myself, but yeah, it will help us if you subscribe. So, like I said, we have Andre Alexander. I think as I was listening to his story, we were conversing, and maybe a starting point, an interesting point. He played 4 sporting codes. Andre, can you tell us what those 4 sporting codes were?
Yeah, well, footy was close to heart, so I started at the age of about 6 in terms of playing football for the Blackie Football Club, close to my home here in Crawford. Well, then in Crawford. And then obviously when I went to primary school, I started participating in athletics in junior sprints, 60 meters, 80 meters, and then going to high school was the 100, 200 meters, and of course the 4x100 relay, made the Spesbona relay team. Obviously, at the age of 15, saw the opportunity to play a summer code, and my brother-in-law invited me from our Hulls Football Club to our Hulls Baseball Club, which was just an extension of a big sports club. Back in the day, the sports clubs used to consist of baseball, softball, badminton. You know, they had multiple codes of sport belonging to a sports club. And I joined baseball, but loved the game. And thereafter, it was a transition from baseball coaching, played a bit of men's softball, and had the brilliant opportunity of representing South Africa in men's softball, football, and baseball. Athletics, I just made the Western Province teams, obviously, represented South Africa in the South African schools competitions, but obviously back in the day we weren't allowed to then travel. So in all 4 codes, I actually had the opportunity of representing my country, which was just an amazing feat.
At the sporting club, did they offer soccer? Or, I didn't hear you. Was there
Yeah, the
soccer at the
soccer. Like I said, I played at Blackie from the age of 6 till 12 or 14. Then I joined the Wolves Football Club at age 15 and played it for 2 seasons. But it was at the Wolves Football Club that we also had a Wolves Baseball and Softball Club, and there also Wolves Volleyball. So it was like, multiple codes that belonged to a particular club. In this case, it was Wolves that I learned my baseball. And my wife obviously played volleyball for the Wolves club.
Okay. So you represented South Africa in football and baseball, is that correct?
That's correct, yes. And a coach in softball. Represented South Africa as a softball coach, men's fast pitch softball coach.
Oh, wow.
That's much later in my life. Much later in my life, though.
Much later. That's interesting. I think I like throwing out these little nuggets. Do you think playing sometimes, I don't think people get narrow-minded, but sometimes you can focus just on one sporting code. Do you think playing different sporting codes helped you develop?
Oh, absolutely. I think it gave you a perception and an idea of different hand and eye coordinations. And of course, with me being a sprinter, it also helped me be able to get across the field. Like for baseball, there's a lot of action time that you have to have as a middle infielder. So you have to react to a ball to your left or to your right. So your quick feet movements that you had learned in athletic training, for example, the multiple steps, because you have to obviously have as many quick steps out of the blocks and then your strides as you continue your race to the 100-meter finish. That sort of quick steps helped me a lot with my baseball movements, particularly lateral movements from left to right, and that was amazing. And then, of course, in athletics, I mean that's now a foregone conclusion. You have to have quick feet, and of course, I had the quick fiber twitches, which was some of the gifts that God had given me, and that helped with my athletics program as well. So yes, I think it did definitely help me as I was growing up. And then, of course, at the age of 16 or 17, I had to then make some choices in terms of what I wanted to focus on.
It's so interesting, like you can put language to every aspect of development, the advantage of playing in different sport, but back then you just did it.
Didn't know anything. Yes, it was all natural. Just love doing it.
I remember we used to set up tennis courts when it was Wimbledon tennis season. We used to set up tennis courts to play. But you don't realize as a youngster how it develops you here, go?
Absolutely. No, I was saying that tennis courts, I remember clearly 19 Rudville Road to 13 Rudville Road. There was like 3 tennis courts set up. And we played with the tennis, with our bats. And of course, when we used to lose, we take our bats, we go home because we're so upset. But tennis was being played. We played cricket in the road. We played dream luckies. We played just about every sport you could. And it was all in that little, from one end of the road to the other.
So Danley Bowman, and we were having this discussion. I interviewed him a few weeks ago, and he was saying, I think that you don't get that anymore, and that sort of affected young people's development. You don't get that where kids are just playing in the road. Would you agree?
Yeah, no, absolutely, because I think it's unsupervised. So you would have to make a lot of decisions on your own as trial and error. You're trying a stroke, or you're trying, you're passing the ball, you're having to beat somebody. And that decision making comes within those small started games where there's no supervision, there's no coaching, it's not structured. You have to do a lot of, in your mind, you have to create little, nuggets in terms of what do you do with the ball when you get it. Are you going to beat the guy? Are you going to flip it over his head? Are you going to do a Maradona turn? You try all of those things because there's no pressure if you lose the ball, because it's all in the name of fun and you're just enjoying it, So you get to express yourself freely.
That's brilliant. I mean, because I think methodology has sort of moved us into there has to be structure at all times.
Yeah.
When we playing in and I'm not saying, I mean, I like having structure within a training session, within a setup, within growing up, but I think that unstructured just play helps you. You put yourself into 1,000 different decision-making moments.
Yes, absolutely.
Have to. So I think the battle is always between the two methodologies is structure versus unstructured. How do you in your coaching now? What do you favor more?
Yeah, but I think it does have an advantage because when you come into structure. So at 16 or 17, when I entered into the Glendon semi-professional league in the Federation Pro League, so Booby was very structured. I write in the book about him taking care of the small details. So if we were playing in Johannesburg, for example, a training session on the Thursday would be in the car park of Athlon Stadium. And we would have had one of those panel balls that they normally played with up in Johannesburg. And that was the ball that we had on the car park. So the bounce of the ball, the control of the ball, the passing, and the weight of the pass would almost simulate what's happening on the Johannesburg fields because they were bone dry, they were hard, and they played with panel balls. And so in the car park, the ball rolled probably as quickly as it would in Johannesburg. And then you had, of course, the altitude. So the ball would just be flying through the air, and you'd have to be trying to anticipate getting onto the cross or allowing to control it as it gets to run away from you. And you have to navigate through that in a car park in simulation for your game in Johannesburg on the weekend, which was crazy. But that's how far Bowie had thought, And I mean, I take a lot of these coaching methodologies and I've applied a lot of that over the years that I've been coaching.
And I think what I'm introducing to my coaching now, I like to empower the young people that I coach that the amount of brain power that it takes to what you're describing now is enormous. So sometimes we as coaches put so much pressure on kids and we're not getting the results we want quick enough, but the amount of brain power it takes to follow one instruction, to move to the left, to still see and be aware of somebody coming behind you, to still put in a cross, it's enormous.
Yeah. I think at the same time, when you've had the opportunity to do all of that creation in your small games on the park or in the road, when you get into that situation, it's almost like muscle memory kicking in, and you react to that particular situation far quicker than if you just had this methodology of you wait for an instruction on every occasion, and that makes it so much more difficult. So what we actually do then as players, we react rather than being proactive to the situation. So you're anticipating, is that defender going to miss the ball? If he misses it, I'm going to be ready to pounce on it and put it into the goal. That's just a silly example. There's always this anticipation and this creativity in your mind that you would want to be on the up and going forward rather than the back foot, reacting to the defender.
I hear you. So, I mean, I could talk about coaching methodology and especially I can hear with you. We could talk hours, but I think I were to draw our attention to the book,
Yes.
Turning Point.
Mm.
Why Turning Point? What made you? Why did you write this book?
So as I shared in probably a number of platforms now, I had a Nigerian pastor that came to Ambassadors in Sports Leadership in 2008 in Cape Town, and I was privy to taking him to the airport on second last day before our closing, and I shared my testimony with him in terms of coming to Christ and the whole process of that. And he said to me, "But Andre, there's a lot of young people that needs to hear your story because it's so encouraging. You've allowed God to come into your life at such a young age. There's a lot of young men that would need to hear your story. Why are you not writing your story?" And he then gave me two little books. It was very thin books, probably about 50 or 80 pages of two books that he had written more around theology and his experience in pastoring and all of that within the context of Nigeria, his country. And he said, "No, you must write the story." So during that period of time, I thought about it, and then occasionally I just write a few sheets. And by the time we got to about 2010, 2012, I had about 50 sheets of manuscripts that I just had. And then I didn't write for, I just left it. It was in fact, it was in my scrapbook.
Wow.
Preston Youngblood, my brother in Christ, CCFM, he comes to visit me in Oudtshoorn in 2018. I wasn't here even, I think I was here about 8 months or so. He came to do some facilitation and he stayed with me, and my scrapbook was on the coffee table, and he opened up and there was this picture of me between two Batchet players. I won't forget them, Royston Little and Futa as we knew him. And I was turning in the rain, but I had that outside hook turn and I was trying to pull the ball between them. And there it was, the big write-up was Andre Alexander Andre turning in the rain. And he says, "Coach, that's a book. That's the book. That's a turning point." I said, "Preston, I actually got a book written here. Let me show you. These are the pages. But I've got it as stepping stones. The life of Joshua, he placed stones over the river as rocks of remembrance. And I had to write over every decade what took place in my life. And I needed to share that as part of my thankfulness to God in terms of where I was and where He's taken me to." And he says, "No, coach, that title must be the turning point." And immediately I thought about it, and I thought it makes sense because at that point in my life where I accept Christ was officially the turning point. It was the turning point, in fact, of my life, and it gave me a bit more direction. It gave me an opportunity to understand what God wanted, but more importantly was my vocational gifts and my spiritual gifts, as our pastor always taught us, was an extension of who I am. It wasn't so. When I wrote the book, I then realized I can't compartmental my life in terms of saying, okay, football's here, church is there, work is here, coaching is there. It was an extension of who Andre was. And as I started writing the last parts and putting the meat to the bones, I got to realize, well, this is it. This is what I needed to do, is get it out. And by the 12th of April, we launched it. So I thank God that I've actually got it done.
And I mean, that's an amazing testimony. And I think from what we were discussing, turning point, when you told me you're working in Oudtshoorn, and I was like, yo, this guy is doing great things. But It was always like that. I mean, you grew up in an apartheid system that told you couldn't be great, that told you, you weren't valuable, that said you can't reach heights that you want to reach, and you did. How was it? How did you manage to do that?
So if I take myself back to athletics at school, particularly high school, because that's where I excelled from the age of 15, and then obviously breaking records at age 16 and 17, there was this opportunity that I had seen in myself to say, the harder I work and I put in the hours, obviously with God's help, then, and I receive that opportunities or the benefits that comes from that hard work, then I can't go and say to a government that was suppressing us or oppressing us that it's your fault that I'm not achieving. So what my dad used to say to me, Andre, you got to channel all that negativity, all that anger, all that suppression of the apartheid system and what it had done to us as young men growing up during the 70s and the 80s, that you channel that into another avenue. And what I then eventually did is I used to then work harder at my athletics. So I would get up at 6 in the morning, walk down Belgrave Road, get down to Silvertown, and we'd train on the back end of the Athlone Stadium for athletics training at 7, get to school at 8, our first period is 10 past 8, and go back there at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And we then still had the UAT Ash track up in Belgravia Road where the College of Cape Town is now in Crawford. And we used to go and do some athletic training there at 6 or 7 in the evening. So when people were resting or studying, I was busy with the extra work, which again you realize as a professional player, when you're putting in the extra bit, when everybody else is sitting back and saying, okay, I'm gonna wait for a handout or my coach to call me, we went out and did the extra bit. And that was what helped me to be able to attain, the great exploits that I had received and attained over that period. But I think the second thing as well was during that years, particularly high school, now getting to make decisions and we seeing the oppression. I then eventually got to the point where every white person became an enemy because I was running times on grass that I could easily have probably improved big time on tartan. But in fact, I ran my worst times on the Faithiskraal Stadium on that tartan track when it eventually was developed and opened. I ran my worst times for the Spartans Athletics Club there than I did on grass. And so over the years, that anger welled up in me. But the day that I had come, the turning point in my life at age 24, God had to work through almost 3, 4, 5, 6, in probably a year of taking away that anger. And I couldn't understand. Well, not that I couldn't understand it. I think it was a great blessing for me because I then got to work with all walks of people from all walks of life in particularly my ministry period with Ambassadors in Sport, which I'm sure we're going to touch on a little bit later.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's brilliant. So at the age of 24, you come to Jesus and he starts working on that anger. And I know during the system, the apartheid system, that I'm not going to say people are justified. Maybe that's not the word, but you can understand the anger from being oppressed. You can understand the anger of somebody having their thumb on you and not allowing you to progress. But like you're saying now, we also understand that anger sort of can be a catalyst to keep you back from achieving what you want to achieve.
Yes. Yeah.
Can you maybe speak into that?
Yeah. And so what I actually did is I wrote in one of the chapters about the apartheid system becomes my ally. So even though it was a curse to us in terms of an injustice to us as black and colored folk, Indian folk, I then realized that what made me more determined to work even harder. And that's probably why I excelled in all 4 codes, because every code I took on, it was like a personal challenge that I'm going to show these white folk that I can play football, I can play baseball, I can run like the wind, I can coach softball. And so that was my determination. That was my end goal, that I would want to prove to myself and to others that I can achieve amidst the challenges that we were facing in that particular period of time.
And that's crazy. I think you, without knowing it, I think without knowing it, and you said, and I mean, in the context, apartheid became your ally. The Bible says that I will turn all things out for your good. Those who love me and are called according to your purpose. So it's not something; it's all things. So having that mindset to realize that this is a challenge. Whatever the challenge is, I'm going to accept it. I don't want to make light of it, or as just our responsibility. But in a sense, you need to take it. So I was reading this verse last week where it says, "I haven't given you a spirit of slavery, but I've given you a spirit to call you sons and daughters." And when you adopt that type of approach, then it's almost like you're not dependent on the system anymore.
No,
you can sort of forge out your own destiny, not your own identity, but your own destiny. Would you?
Yes. Yeah. No, absolutely. And I think again, when you realize that the gifts that God has given you, and I like that quote. I'm not sure where the scripture is about. You don't hide your light under the bushel, but you allow it to shine. And so for us as a family coming out of 8, we always had this big heart to serve. But I have a whole lot of folk I mentioned Bernie Canema in the book, my first football coach. I mean, he was a scout master, task master, but he showed us great values in terms of first at training, last at training, taking care of the kid, taking care of the registrations, all of those type of things. And again, at the football field on the Saturday, he's the first in and the last person to leave the field, even when the seniors are finished playing, to make sure balls and stuff has all been taken place in his car, and off he goes. I mean, then you have coaches that have come along my life and have shaped me, giving instructions. Bobby Solomon's a good example. My brother-in-law said it. Those are all guys who influenced my makeup of my football and my character, shaped my character. My late dad, coming in and always saying, keep your head on your shoulders, young man. You're not bigger than this game. You're not an island either. Know that if you're in a team context, playing in a team context, it's about the other 10 if it's a football playing team, or it's another 8 if it's a baseball playing team of 9 players. And so those are some of the profound nuggets, as well as good instructions that I got over the years that I hung on to for dear life, and I still practice that within my own coaching. That we together, we can achieve more as a team, and I live by that philosophy, and that's helped a whole lot to be able to focus and say that I don't need a handout. I don't need to be determined by the color of my skin. I don't have to be influenced by a particular coach or administrator. I would work as hard as I can and then allow God to do what he does best to create the opportunities. I mean, even this interview was done by word of mouth, somebody saying to you, oh, by the way, Andres writing a book, and I have the opportunity to come and share this evening. Again, that's God that just created the door. But I write in the book as well.
What would you say?
Preparedness meets opportunity.
Of course. So what would you say? I think the things that you're mentioning now is a lot of things that I've had to deal with in maybe the last 2 or 3 years, is that I'm not defined by the color of my skin. I'm not defined by what the system tells me. And I think one of the products of that was that I sort of got this freedom. It's funny, it's Freedom Day today, but I think Jesus sort of gave me this freedom to start taking initiative.
Yes.
To have this sort of confidence, because I know, and I do think sometimes youngsters maybe, and obviously depending on the context and the youngsters, sometimes it is laziness. But I think a big part of why kids maybe stay within that shell, and we see that they're not maybe working as hard and they're not expressing themselves, is because of their value, is because of their value system, and they don't value themselves. So if you don't value yourself, it's almost like, why even work hard? Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, absolutely. In fact, I'm a product of that. I've come out of a big family of 8, but when I started schooling and I got to maybe standard 1, I was still very much an introvert. So it's like when you have to say a recitation in front of the class and it's in Afrikaans, it's not your first language, and you stand there and your fingers and your knees are knocking, and you're so scared to make the mistake because the kids are just gonna laugh, and so that fear of reciting that recitation, when it was my turn, I felt like the floor had to just open up and swallow me in. Then my PE teacher comes, Mrs. Kleintjes, and says, but you're a great athlete, Andre. And she walks around with me and puts me through my paces. And then I start winning races, and I'm thinking, wow, I'm actually good at this. Then I play football for the school, and I become the school captain. I'm thinking, wow, I'm good at this. And I started developing my character, and then I didn't second guess myself anymore. I rather than just continued striving to become the best I could in the codes of sport that I was gifted in. And as I developed that, and my leadership developed, and taking in counsel from other people, being fed by Mrs. Kleintjes, my brother-in-laws, my sisters, family members, my wife, in the case of, you can do this, man. You don't have to always think that you're the worst, or you're not going to be able to overcome that. You can because you're going to try. And I even use that as a coaching philosophy. You can because you tried. So you have to take that first step as a young person. If it's a new job, if it's a new club you have to go to, you've got to take that first step. If you don't, you're never going to know.
And that's brilliant. That your mindset was, I'm just going to try. And it's so important. It's so vital. If that teacher, and I think God does this for us, when he looks at us. I remember when I was playing for Santos and I went through a really difficult period, a really difficult 6-month period. And the only thing that kept me going was God doesn't care whether I score 100 goals or not, whether I miss
Yes.
100 goals or not. He cares that
Yeah.
I'm enjoying the game, how I treat
Yes.
my teammates, how I interact with my teammates, how hard I work,
Yes.
how
Absolutely.
consistent I am at working hard. And at the end of that 6 months, I developed
Yeah.
something, or he gave me something that I still carry with me today. And that's like
And
10 years
yeah.
later. So,
Yes.
do you think role models are key? Because we sort of act as God's vehicles or conduits on this earth. Do you think role
Yes.
models play a crucial role in young people's lives?
No, absolutely. And I think perhaps we can't have him that far reaching. So it can't be a Ronaldo all the time. It can't be a Messi. It can't be a Real Madrid
Mm,
manager. It's got to be a little bit closer to home. So when we were
mm,
growing up, it was the Bobby Solomons, it was the Georgie van
mm,
Niekerks, it was the Clive Darrys, the Donny
mm,
Ronnies. You know, those are the
mm,
people that we looked up to in our local football, the Bernard Hutzes, where those guys were
mm,
playing brilliant football and you're sitting in the stadium and you're saying to yourself, I want to be playing there one day. I want to be striving and doing what those guys are doing. And through that process, we started even mimicking. I used to call myself Bernard Hudson baby on the small park where there was 3v3 or 4v4. So we imitate some of the moves that you do, the step overs, or his running ability past players. We tried that on the field.
mm,
And even in terms of my growing up, Duncan and I were, I mean, Duncan's a year older than me. So Duncan Crowley and I, Nevin Payne, they played for Cathkin High. And obviously I was a Spitsbona. So we were great rivals when we played in our school league games. But when we came to Glendon and Nevin was at Santos in the Federation Pro League, there was still that sharpness that we were opponents. Duncan and I were on the same team against Nevin, and there was this, iron
mm.
sharpening iron. After the game, we had hot conversations, about just about everything else. And those that we used to look up to, those even though they were similar of age, they went on and did great exploits in football. And I always often Duncan and I had this challenge going on saying who's going to be playing pro football the longest. He played till 37. My career ended at 20, died with an ACL, a blown up ACL. So,
Wow.
but again, that was the thing that happened. We looked up to the senior players.
I'm gonna
But
call.
they
I'm
were
gonna
close.
add in the
They were
name
close.
there, Andre. I'm gonna add in the name there, Andre Alexander, because I mean, just talking to you,
Yes.
it's so
Yeah.
inspiring. Just talking to you, so I can imagine being one of the kids under you. How
Yes.
inspiring it is. But I believe we look at the system and the apartheid system, like I said on Facebook, the apartheid system. There are legacies that it's left.
Yes.
We still, as young people that I coach, I still see them struggling with confidence issues, struggling with fear,
Yeah.
struggling with identity issues. They don't believe in themselves. They don't think they're good enough. They don't think they can aspire to something greater. And I
Yeah.
think from our discussion, we slowly finding out that it must be closer to home.
Yes.
It has to be
Yeah.
close to home. That
Yeah.
mentor or that person that's just going to inspire. I remember having conversations with boys at our school where I used to coach, and small conversations, 1 or 2 words, encouraging words, where that boy, I literally saw him skipping away
Yes. Yeah.
with, he had that
Absolutely.
happiness and he was settled again,
Yes.
and he was like, okay, I can continue. So
Yeah.
what do we do? I know we can't find solutions in one show, but what is sort of the answer to changing the mindsets of our next generation to say you
Yeah.
can aspire to greater things?
Yeah. I think for me personally, again, bringing it closer to home is the scars of apartheid, the scars of disappointment. I mean, my ACL blown at age 29, my second game for Santos in the new PSL structure. I mean, I had my whole football career to me. I could easily have sat and wallowed in that, which I did for 2 weeks, by the way. I cried for 2 weeks. I just didn't want to have anything to do with football, even blame God for taking away my football career, that's all I wanted to do was play football. But strange enough, I had my pastor come and serve me for a week. And he said some
Wow.
profound words. He
Wow.
said to me, Andre, at the end of that week, he came and Pastor Dion said, Andre, your disappointment is God's appointment for greater things. And I
Wow.
didn't know at that stage at 29, I didn't want to even hear that, Jono, because it was a case of, Pastor, you can say that, but I want to be a professional footballer. And at this moment in time, I don't think I'm going to be able to play again. So those words are very empty. Maybe 6 weeks later, 8 weeks later, through my recovery, I realized that God was using me. So I started letting go and letting God come and show me different opportunities. So my coaching opportunities had increased. I then had more opportunities to be coached, to coach softball, baseball, even football, and took me to National First Division and SA softball men's team
And
to New
and
Zealand in 2004. And even
so
through that,
so through your coaching, you've had more opportunities, and it's almost in a sense had a greater success than your
yes,
playing days. Would you
I
agree?
mean,
Or
I think it's equal because the playing days was exhilarating. It was something that I was always passionate about. So I got the fulfillment of being able to achieve through the years, at provincial and at national level.
yeah,
Obviously, the professional level would have put the cherry on the top, but that
yeah,
wasn't what I did. And then I took on the coaching with similar passion, taking care of small details, being prepared for
mm,
opportunities that might come. So when the opportunities came, I was then ready to be able to produce that rather than sitting and worrying about, oh, I don't have this professional life anymore. But I also made sure that I surrounded myself with people that could speak into my life. And some of it was harsh. Some of it was harsh. And I think young people, I think just to conclude, John, I've realized that my dad was very instrumental in my sport. Even though he worked 2 and 3 jobs, he always came to games when he wasn't working on a Saturday. And he had these key words, hard and low, son. So you just say those words, and I'd know he's in the stadium, and I'd like settle down and I can play. Now I
what
know
was
a lot
his
of young
words? What
people
was his words?
hard and low. So I had to kick the ball
Hard and
hard and
low.
low, and that gets you goals. Don't try and kick it up in the corners. Those tall goalkeepers are just going to pluck it out. You kick it hard and low, goalkeepers can't get down quick enough. And those were the key words he used to say at almost every game he came to. And so I know young people don't have a lot of father figures, but they must find a mentor. They must find somebody that they can confide in, somebody that will be able to walk the
Mm,
road with them and pick them up on those days when they're at their worst. Like you said, you then got somebody to pick you up when you had your worst days, when you were not getting the goals. You feel like, hey, maybe I must just give up on football. And then Bobby would come, or Jean Marc would come, or somebody would come and say, hey,
mm,
John, you know what? Just keep on keeping on. And that's what people said to me, just keep on keeping on, you know. And I
mm.
think young people need to position themselves with some good quality people that can feed in their lives. Not too many, because if we have too many, you have too many voices, and it confuses you even more. So confide in 2 or 3 people, depending on the trust and the relationship that you have with that individual. That would be my
So
counsel.
for me, I remember when I was just starting my journey with Christ and football, Bruce Naden was instrumental
Oh, the
in
Rev, the Rev,
helping
yeah,
me with
yeah, no,
understanding that
he's
just God
amazing.
loves you
Yeah,
irrespectively. I've mentioned in the
yes,
interview a few months ago that my wife also extremely instrumental in just loving me unconditionally, and
yes,
just
yeah,
having somebody in your life that loves you unconditionally, that accepts
yes,
you, changes
yeah,
the way changed the way I played. It changed the way I viewed life. It
yeah,
changed the way. But I also know, unfortunately, one of the legacies that sort of apartheid has left behind, that we sort of just in it for ourselves.
yes,
We
yes,
don't really reach out to anybody else because the
yeah,
focus is very much on what I need to do for
yes,
myself. How can I get? Because I mean, to a certain extent, I understand it. Resources was so little that we all ended up fighting, and our mindset developed like sort of you have to fight for those little resources. But I
yeah,
think once we encounter God, your mindset changes, that there
yeah,
is enough for everybody. Do you maybe want
yeah.
to speak a little into that?
Yeah, no, I think for me it was also the fact that I mean, if you think of Jesus had sent out the disciples, he couldn't accomplish all of what he wanted to on earth, but he trained up individuals and he sent them out to go and do the work. And similar within the context of the team, you got your fullbacks, so it's your back four, you got your midfielders and your strikers, and so you can't do that on your own. And I think for us, back in the apartheid years, the lessons that we learned was that that sense of that brotherhood bond that we had, we all had the same goal. We wanted to win trophies. We wanted to be the best footballers. We wanted to be in the first 11. So you'd
Mm.
fight for your place on that Thursday. You'd give everything at training to make sure you get announced in the first 11 before we
You,
travel for our double headers. But even when you were not in the first 11, you sat on the bench and you supported every player as if you were on the field. So that when you came on, they would give you that exact same support as they were now obviously on the bench and giving you that support. And so for me, that also reciprocation of giving as much as you can and serving others without that fear of I'm not going to get anything out of this. you'll be
mm,
surprised that you actually get more out of it. Because
mm,
again, what does the word say? Isn't it better to serve than to be served? And so, in the context of team sports, and that's why I enjoyed team sports more than the athletics, which was individual, was all about Andre Alexander. But when I played on team sports, baseball, softball, and football, it gave me an opportunity to be able to, just to bond with other guys and be able to be support. So when I was the captain of Clearwood, sometimes you have the worst games, but you're encouraging your players and just getting them to play. And there's going to be
mm.
those days. That's what leadership is. You have to continue encouraging and being there. Sometimes you don't even have to lead from the front by having a good game. You can lead from the back.
Absolutely.
Just giving the ball up and being insignificant because you're just not on your game today. And you accept because the other players come and they pick you up.
And I think it comes down to knowing that you're not insignificant,
Absolutely.
and not just knowing
Absolutely.
it, but believing that you are not insignificant, that
Yeah.
God created you with a purpose.
Absolutely.
And because He created you, I always have this discussion, and I said, and I came to this realization once that I'm valuable because I'm a human being,
Yeah.
period. Not
Yes.
because I won 10 trophies, not
Yeah.
because I'm going to have this level of status, or
Yeah.
I have this position. I am
But
valuable because I'm a human being.
yeah. But isn't that what the world dictates now? That you are then justified and you are judged by what you have, how much money you have, how much cars you drive, all of those type of things. So when the players get into the professional setup, they're looking for the fast cars, they're looking for the big houses, they're creating all this debt, but they don't buy houses for assets when they finish with football. They don't go and do extra studies so that there's life after football. Just
Mm,
small things like that. And so it becomes the peer pressure is different than what it was back in the apartheid era, because we were all, like I said earlier, we were all fighting for the same thing, and that was to become the best and also to break down the oppression that was happening. Because I mean, many of our players,
mm,
for example, was being asked to come and play for the Hellenics or the cities of the
mm,
day back in the 70s and the 80s, and you maybe get a couple of $100, but you still have to come back to Crawford, to the two-bedroom home that you share with four brothers in one room. You still have to come home to a pot of food that the community shared with your 8 siblings or 7 siblings. You still have to come to your home that has gravel roads and not tarred roads. So for us to go enjoy 1.5 hours of football, get the 100 or 200, and you still have to come back to the ghettos to be able to
yeah.
then say, now I'm back with my family. And I couldn't
Mm,
see that as there wasn't justification for me to be
mm,
able to receive that little bit while I know my family back home is just about keeping it together on the breadline in terms of being able to provide.
mm, mm,
So there was also that type of check in terms of, here's some moral decisions and values that you have to apply, Andre. Do you want the benefits of a little bit of money for a short while, or is
mm,
there going to be long-term gains? And I can probably say the long-term gains is even this conversation today, as God has allowed me to mature and the opportunities that created, is
mm,
because we just waited out whatever we had to do, and we worked as hard as we can, as honestly as we
mm,
could, all the time
mm,
at our game, and then the
mm.
benefits came.
In whatever situation, good or bad.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Andre, this conversation is so enlightening. I, I, I don't know. Would you maybe just want to talk a bit more about your book? Tell us where we
Yeah.
can get it.
So here it is, Jono. It's called The Turning Point. It's officially now the first 200 were sold. There's about
Wow.
70 copies available between my brother and my publisher, Mervyn Whittle. So they can get the book from my brother Tony Alexander. And he's at number 16 Courts Avenue, Penland Estate. And his mobile number is 082
Yes.
899
Yes.
1299 082 899 1299. And then my publisher is Mervyn Whittle, and he stays at number 26 Short Market Street at Telford Muse in Ottery. And you can also get the book from him. I'm just getting his number quickly so that we can actually put that on for the listeners as well.
Can we
So,
just
so
leave on Tony Alexander for now?
yes, we
Because
can.
I
Yeah,
change
that's
it
good.
and then,
That's good. He's got
so
more of
just
the copies anyway.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So 200 books already sold. That's amazing.
Yes. So we just broke up there. So
I say
can you hear me?
200. 200 books already sold. That's amazing.
That was just, I was just blown away. I mean, we launched on the 12th. We did pre-order since the 10th of March, and we're now officially on the 27th of April. And it's just been amazing response. We've had a few reviews already of folk that have read the book and ex-players that I played with, and some that have been spectators. And they just absolutely, I've taken them down memory lane around the Athlone Stadium, the green grass, the liniment oil, all of that. It's just been amazing feedback. So I really thank God that I've been able to impact quite a number of people. But more importantly, I want to encourage them that they have to keep on keeping on.
And I think from my side, I want to say language is very, very important. Words are very, very important. And I mean, in the culture that we live in currently, we need so many role models, from our own culture. We need so many role models from our own setting and context, because I believe that when kids see Andre Alexander, they can relate more. So if he could do it, I can do it.
Absolutely.
You know what I'm trying to say.
That was a very
I would recommend, and I would say parents, children, youth, really try and get this book, because I believe it in my heart that words and language is extremely important, and words and language that build you up is key.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I can attest to that, because I was one of those youngsters that had the role models, as I said, the Bernard Hudsons of the world, the Clive Darrises as defenders, Donny Ronnies who played some great football. Those were my role models, and aspiring to be able to play or on that stage with them. And you know what's amazing? If I just think back now, Clive Darris was in that Glendon team. Bobby Solomons was in that Glendon team. Trevor Manuel was in that Glendon team. And those are the guys that I went to watch at the Athlone Stadium. And I mean, they were 5, 6, 7 years, in fact, 8 years older than me. I've got to grace the field with them. And so nothing is impossible. I believe nothing is impossible. It might not pan out for all of us, but we have to maintain the positivity that something good can come out of that.
And I mean, like what you're doing now, so everybody has their own path, and everybody's going to find success. And God has a plan for everybody. So your success might not necessarily look like mine, but I do want to encourage young people to find the right mentor. And I want to encourage older folk, become mentors, become role models, because our youth really, really need it. They are looking to us as the primary source. They can relate to us. I've always said this when I speak to kids. I said, I know what's going on with you because I was you. So, so because I was you, I know what you're feeling. I know what you're going through. So, I mean, older generation, ex-footballers, if you're not a footballer, become a mentor, become a builder in somebody's life.
Yes, absolutely.
And buy Andre Alexander's book, Turning Point.
Thank you, Jonathan. I appreciate that so much.
Andre, we're going to have you on again, because I think 40 minutes doesn't do it justice to talk about a range of topics. But yeah, we will definitely have you on again to talk about something more specific. But I really want to thank you. It's been a privilege and an honor to interview you tonight.
Thank you, Jonathan. I really appreciate it. And to the listeners who've linked up with us this evening, thank you again for your support and for your love. And Jonathan, again, I just want to encourage you to continue doing the great work, continue loving the Lord, and continue just allowing ourselves to be youth of God and for His kingdom. So again, tonight, I just want to say thank you so much, and may God bless you in all your future endeavors.
Thank you so much. This is also recorded, so you can go to the link and it will be on YouTube. It will be loaded on YouTube in the next hour or two. But thanks for joining, listeners.